Hello, welcome to 5D Options, your home of quantum IT tech tips. This is where people come to learn from experience and not theory to help refactor your approach in IT and ultimately enrich your career and portfolio.
Hi everybody, this is Tim Fraser from 5D Options. I'm back here today to talk about why software houses and companies are having problems with cloud adoption. And the title of today's talk is Cloud Resistance, and I've personally seen some of these behaviors in organizations that are preventing rapid adoption of cloud. So let's go through some topics specifically around cloud adoption, where the problems are, what the life cycle of cloud adoption looks like in terms of it's really a change management problem. So if you look at a change management view on top of cloud, you can see where your obvious bear traps are. So let's go through that. So let me quickly read a couple of articles. By the way, I want to give credit to Cloud Technology Partners for significant material they have produced in this domain of cloud, and some of my talk includes some of their materials. So I want to thank them for the amazing work they do in this industry. But my personal experience is really what I want to talk about, and I'm going to use the guidelines of some of their recent articles in their Doppler report, which is actually quite an amazing thing. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, check out the Doppler report from Cloud Technology Partners. Now, on the practical side, I'm going to share some personal experiences around cloud adoption and why people resist the cloud. Bottom line is, cloud is a transformational technology, so it threatens the status quo of technologies of the traditional roles and responsibilities of large enterprises. I'm sure those of you who've lived the life cycle of going from physical to virtual machines, you experienced the shifting from non-integrated hardware into integrated converged hardware. In that life cycle change, you basically take system admins and database and network guys and combine them into a unified platform, and that was an alien response to how to, who does what and what the change of authority is in terms of, or the change of responsibility and the domain of authority for who does what on what system. Well, cloud has made that even more, let's just say, more of a challenge. So anyway, so the how things are done and who does it is really a shift in fundamentally what cloud is done to the industry. Major cloud initiatives that introduce large changing platforms like introduction of cloud and all that needs that the workers need to retool and acquire themselves new skills. Now, a lot of resistance in change. No one has a problem with change so long as it doesn't happen to them. So this is a perfect example of where you have a situation where you have network engineers and they're no longer responsible for firewall changes and router changes, hardware configurations, but instead they end up learning how to manage virtual private clouds and build their network and architectures using engineering constructs such as code. So it is not normal for somebody who's doing network engineering or even storage administration to think that they're going to write pseudocode, Java code, JavaScript, or some other Python or some other coding construct to truly be responsible for that environment. A lot of times it's experiential, and they use a lot of their experience to be able to build environments the same way. They might be okay with writing some scripts to do some pre and post automation steps, but quite frankly, they don't think in terms of everything is done through code and not just touching the keyboard anymore. And it is a design pattern conversation at that point, and building it in a consistent way that's predictable and scalable. So those are the two of the challenges I've seen. The other thing is that cloud sort of displaces the certain roles in others. So it creates new jobs and it takes away some jobs. So this is a little bit of a threat to some of the organizational individuals that are basically functioning at what I call low-tiered integration and adoption of any automation. So automation as a framework brings us up a stack. Automation requires coding requires discipline requires change management automation. All that fits into this vegetable soup. So people resist the cloud for a lot of these reasons. So now let me go through this chart. There's a typical cycle of change management, and it's a change management performance curve where you start in these phases. Phase one is this whole this whole phase of excitement, and you basically got you start a project, you get all excited, we're going to do something with cloud, and you establish a clear executive sponsorship of doing something cool and new. And then very quickly you go through this process of, oh my God, the reality kicks in, and you start going down the phase 2 of this, which is the reality check around, well, so this takes some discipline. It takes some planning, some design, some automation, and some different skills and different way of looking at problems. So you go through this cycle. So you start out on this exciting hype curve and you go down this way, what typically is like a disillusionment curve. And this is really the organizational fatigue area. The organization at this point may see some of the initiatives of cloud as initially as, hey, we're just going to launch a project. It's called a cloud project, and it's tied to a project initiative, and it might be a tactical view to just get something out the door. And oh yeah, we got cloud, and we're going to do something net new and help a couple of the business units. When you get into the reality of building that, you're really building a foundational layer. If you go to some of my previous videos, you will see that there is a very complex stack that you're building on top of, and you've got to build some standards and practices and processes to be able to automate all those pieces of the stack. So you go through this whole design and engineering side of this, which reality check is your teams may not be fully skilled to do some of the stuff, and they're trying to learn as they do, and it becomes a very long-tailed item. The best area I would say of improvement is if you look at this area where you're going down in this phase 2, which is this whole realization of the effort and the complexity of what you've embraced. It's at this point you want to accelerate. You really want to accelerate, because the longer you sit in that phase, the longer your organizational fatigue is going to occur, and you're basically going to deal with a lot of problems where you have loss in momentum, you'll have loss of image in terms of your project success. Things take longer, you miss dates, complexities, you have to fight battles with security and data protection, all the housekeeping that's got to be done to create a governed environment. So to really do that, there's a framework I'm going to cover that really helps you be able to accelerate through that process. And as you come out of this process and you do a little bit of hopefully some acceleration and standardization to get things done, that's when you end up with learning. So you get into this phase of learning to test and iterate and demonstrate capabilities, and this is where the opportunity exists to really create a foundation. And the cloud technology partners, they create the language called MVC, which is basically a minimum viable cloud. So minimum viable cloud is what you've got to have as a foundation to be able to offer some core services. I've actually been through several cloud migrations and cloud adoption strategies, and I found that this is the place where we get stuck. We really get stuck because you want to show the results, but you also got to lay the foundation. And this is where we get into this churn about what's good enough, and working with the security and the data governance and the process and automation through quality assurance and all the what I call demarcations between the organization that typically occurs through manual processes. You're now going to fast track that through new ways. So you have to go through an awful lot of organizational change processes to really get to that. So this is an area where you have an opportunity to really accelerate and set some expectations appropriately on how that can be done. Once you get some acceleration, you set some foundations, and that's when you really get into the whole area of what I call scaled migration of the full cloud operations. And this is where you get into momentum. People feel like, oh, now we can build upon the framework. The most recent cloud project I've worked on, we reached that place where the developers and the engineers and the DevOps team, they actually started to rewrite all their code. They wrote 6 months before, and they wrote it in 2 weeks, and they iterated faster, and they were able to get more things done, and they created a building block structure. So this whole process of learning and exploring and getting the foundations and learning how to do things different, so you can go where no man has gone before, if you know what I mean. So you can, in effect, accelerate this thing, go into hyperdrive. So this is an opportunity to take a look at this curve, the actual performance curve on how cloud is going to be able to truly slow you down in terms of the adoption, but it's also a place for you to learn how to jumpstart this thing. So let's go through a couple of the things. I covered the initial excitement phases. Key thing is the initial excitement is keeping an open mind where all the benefits of the clouds are. So in this phase, stay on the focus. What can the benefit do, the adoption strategy, and what it will do for the company. So this is the excitement, get it up and running, build an initiative to drive that through your organization. And the initiative, like I said, once again, on phase one, looks like a typical project. It looks like a standard project. It goes through the pipeline. It gets the rubber stamp through approvals, but you really are moving a transformational project through there. A lot of companies take the tactical approach to get to cloud. If you take a strategic approach to get to cloud and you're really doing a leapfrog approach and you do digital transformation and a foundation, that's a different journey. That's not the journey I'm talking about here. I'm talking about where companies want to do something towards cloud. They know they're going to do something around acceleration to business, acceleration for value for the business. Okay, so in effect, what they're doing is they're using the leverage of the business driving shadow IT to use cloud services and bring that in-house and say, let me do this for you guys, and let's do this in a standardized way. Let's put some governance and control around your cloud investments, and then invest appropriately for that. And that might look like a tactical project to start with. So basically, this is an example where all the participants can easily navigate through all the project milestones. It looks like a regular project. Like I said, phase two, once again, is the realization of the effort. This is where we go, oh my God, wow, this is harder than you think, and we may not be skilled to do all this work, and you're basically building a team to learn how to do this. You're not going to have a lot of success bringing consultants in from the outside to just deploy a cloud and then walk away without doing some training. It really makes sense to, if you bring somebody in to really jumpstart the program, it be a mentorship program so your teams can learn from this process and they really can iterate towards a faster time to learning and retooling and reskilling your teams. And that is not just technical skills, guys. I've said this before. This is about how to think differently and how to operate in a different way of operating. So challenging your ITIL processes. Look at every step in the process and see how that process can be optimized. How can you eliminate steps? How can you eliminate process through standardized builds and standardized deployments and automated approvals for certain key things that do require writing and approvals? Okay. This is also the place where you need people, and because things get harder and it takes longer, and you slow down. You feels like you're going through the mud. In the spirit of a little Star Trek going on here, maybe it's a little bit of going through a deep cloud nebula, and you can't see where you're going. You know there's a Klingon on the other side of some cloud, and there's a lot of static and radiation in your clouds that are going to get you. So you got to basically get to the point where you have cooperation with your leadership to have the patience to drive you to the next level. This is also the place where it is very easy to move into internally the cloud team to move to resistance, because you feel like, well, no, this, I told you so, this is not going to work. You've got to build that momentum energized towards getting things done and showing results very quickly. And this is the place where people want to seek refuge in their old jobs, and you got to avoid that. So be careful of that. Avoid the conversations that people are just going to hunker down and go, oh, this too shall pass, and cloud's going to come and go. This was not really, we're special, and the cloud really doesn't work for us given our unique business requirements. A lot of companies say that. The truth is most companies can get over that pretty quickly. All right, phase three. Phase three, like I said before, a summary. This is the integration. This is the integration phase where your employees and stakeholders now start to see how things are fitting. They see how things are fitting, both from an adoption of the technologies, of layers of integration, but it's also the adoption of the program in terms of how do you consume the cloud, how do you work with your IT teams in a different way, how do you show results faster, working with the business teams, specifically showing the improvements of the benefits of your program that you've created a foundation for. And this is really where you might need more support than you realize at this stage, because you're not quite over the hump. You're still at that place where you're catching some momentum. And this is where it's easy to get frustrated on some things. It's okay to fail. It's okay to fail fast. Iterate again. If you got to rewrite your code that you wrote, you spent 6 months writing, and you can spend 2 weeks to rewrite it. That's a tough call. Sometimes that's a hard one, and you think you can hold on to what you got. it may be better for you to just reuse your learnings towards a new way of getting things done. So that's the phase 3, and of course, as I said previously, the new confidence of in phase 4, everybody moves on. You've now got a transition tipping point, and where cloud becomes the norm. This is hopefully where you guys can reach sooner rather than later. Acceleration. So let's talk about how do you get some acceleration. By the way, this is the phase in which you build team momentum and people start going, wow, you should try this. This is where the social engineering of your organization is going to occur with your technologists. So they're going to go, look what I've done. Hey, you could learn cloud. It could change your skills. You could do things faster, and then you can work with the business. You start having higher level conversations with your business about what cloud can do for them, as opposed to lower level conversations about moving bits and bytes around and moving data around networks. So that's the shift that you'll see happen at this stage, and that's really the road to acceleration. Okay. Now let me talk a little bit about the minimum viable cloud. A quick definition: minimum viable cloud is a secure public cloud environment running at least one client application that is designed to exercise an organization's muscles. So you're not testing everything in the application. It might be a simple, lightweight application that's relatively safe and secure to move out there, but you're really testing the organizational muscles. What is that? So muscles includes, security and governance and processes and all that. So I'm going to cover that in one more second. But this is where you are testing the viability of your organization and your processes and your discipline, and engage all the necessary stakeholders at this stage. This is really, really a key step in making sure you take an approach. For example, in the approach I've taken on the last build for cloud services in a company, it was actually relatively easy for me because, quite frankly, they were primed to build a standardized, certified build environment. There's a certification process that this company has to go through for regulatory controls in global operations. And in doing that, they have to have certified build, certified traceable things. So building a recipe of the build process and build the build steps, whether it is be imaged or it be using Jenkins or Puppet from a build automation perspective, the actual build process is what you certify. And you build a recipe of building a layered cake. So as you build layers and you add layers to the cake, if you are using all those standard set of layers of the build cycle, build process, so you may have a Windows server using certain IaaS build environment, or it might be maybe a Linux server running on CentOS or Amazon Linux with a MySQL database, and that is your base foundation. And now you can bring your application. It might bring messaging services, so a bus with it and all that, and that's an app stack that needs to be certified, but the cloud stack is pre-certified. So it allows you to jumpstart and build the stuff from scratch and build it the same way, exactly the same way. So what you in effect are doing is not testing and certifying every build and every process. You can sample test those as a periodic evaluation that your processes are not breaking and you have the same results. But you're really in assuring that the build process is exactly the same. That's a key piece of the ingredient in building out the automation process using recipes and builds. And like I said, you could use automation scripts as a process, so you can build a script which is certified, which then builds a certified image, which then you deploy 100 times. Okay, it's all about layering cakes, layering the cake, so you can build these stacks in a buildable framework that allows you to piece it together. Okay. Number 2 is your shortest time to value is essentially a secure cloud environment that can be built on a public platform, typically built on in the build phase of your cloud adoption program. So in the early phase of your phase 1 of your cloud adoption, this is when you start introducing what is a minimum cloud, and the characteristics of a minimum cloud could be as simple as, you've got a dev, dev, prod, and you may have big data, you may have some other big data production, so you may have data analytics and transactional systems, and bringing them together under a unified framework, so you end up with virtual private clouds connecting across your centralized networks. You may provide a centralized data movement, so you may have a cloud bridging service in the middle, or you may end up doing direct connect if it's an Amazon type product. So you can in effect basically allow connectivity, and that connectivity introduces domains of operations and security zones and allows you to do access controls and govern all these security pieces and watches the data, and you can put the monitors on that environment. So you can in effect have a simple framework that allows you to now move data and apps across zones. So highly secure baseline, that's key. Automated imaging process you build through repetition, through a recipe. Connect all your on-premise and your network systems together, so you may have data going in towards the cloud and for certain use cases, but only in that direction, but not back the other way, based on security and governance of that. And here's the most important thing: don't try to integrate everything on day one. Go with federated approach. Start with a cloud best practices first, and then do a data center best practices, knowing that you're going to have to do a hybrid. And when you get into the hybrid adoption, that's a conversation we'll have later about how to do cloud management platforms, which is my one of my previous videos. If you're interested, check that out. That covers the CMP cloud management platform that allows you to manage both the same way. Okay. So centralized services will include monitoring, logging. You need to offer those as core services. A developer should not even be asking those things. Those are out of the box. You get monitoring and logging. Depending on if it's dev, prod, or test, you may provide different levels of access controls through security and IAM. You may provide, some level of governance and access, and maybe even delegated authority for groups and projects can have their own delegated authority for account management. But you want a centralized account management so you can see all the accounts and what's going on, so you can tag your workloads appropriately and have an audit trail from a financial perspective, which I'm going to cover next. Of course, encryption at the right places, moving data in flight, and networking is just the backbone to get data moved from point A to point B. VPN might be good enough to go from data center to your virtual private cloud, but you'll eventually move to some sort of a more dedicated connection if you're going to move a lot of data back and forth, and you want to have some reliability and manageability of those services. Disaster recovery or business continuity may actually be a design pattern that you would inflict. I say inflict. You may want to inflict that on the application teams to start thinking about. Maybe they're used to putting one server in a data center VMware environment, and VMware takes care of all that for you. If you're not familiar with some of the principles behind that, take a look at my video that says thinking differently around between VMware and cloud, and how and virtualization and cloud, and how you need to think differently on day one at the app tier about what you count on underneath you. So that's probably a good tip on that one. So looking at disaster recovery, but also not just business continuity, but backup and recovery, and where do you put your data, and automatically doing backups and recovery of both the images, the application data, and the transient data, and then in the context of business continuity and recovery, okay, based on your SLAs and expected for that application. And the underlying automation services, so you have a Puppet or Jenkins, or you may have Kubernetes, or you may have your Docker container management that you may include as a service, so the applications can consume those readily. Okay. And the cost management services includes security, operations, like I said, automation, resource management. Who's using much? Are we using the resources we intended to, or are we overusing them? Are the resources idle when they really are the resources being left idle when they really could be quiesced and shut down? Remember, cloud is all about elasticity, both up and down. So take advantage of those services. Don't pay for things when you don't need to. The cost controls around that. You may have a governance program on, maybe have a managed service around CloudWatch or some of those tools, like in the Amazon ecosystem, where you can in effect take those systems that are running and have an oversight to make sure you have a cost overview. Whether you do chargeback or not, it's very relevant to manage the cost controls. Okay, underlying tooling of your version controlling. Remember, a cloud is now also a code-based infrastructure. You got to have change control, version control of all your assets. Any image that you build and deploy has to go through change control, and you need to build that a automation pipeline for your cloud elements as well, not just the application. So you may build a change control pipeline for continuous implementation and deployment, integration and deployment, so you can in effect rapidly put a new version of cloud up and have two versions running at the same time, and deprecate one and have HA built into your thing. Those are design principles. You don't have to have all the maturities in the stack like I've just described, but it's a foundational pieces to have these tools in place so you can do automation and governance and control and security and all that stuff. You may have a third-party enterprise security monitors that in effect are going to also be responsible for bringing a data collection point and move it into a enterprise reporting tool for security, centralized security monitoring for incident problems, security incidents and problems. And of course, I mentioned earlier the account structure. Very, very important to think about your hierarchy of your account structure at this stage in the game, because it's really difficult to undo that later. You have to do migrations from one account to the other. And once you've got a foundation laid, it'd be easier to just incrementally add. So think about your application account structure in the context of delegated authority and distribution of environments across geographies. So if you got multiple zones and you got multiple teams, how do they work? How do they share assets? Can a member in one geography access a resource from a member in another team, and can they cross over? Is it a matrix managed operational business operation? So you effectively you've got people who are working collaboratively in a matrix, or is it just dedicated teams working in small contained spaces? Those conversations will drive different designs in terms of your account structure. I will say this about account structure: keep it simple. It can be a nightmare if you don't get it right, and keep it at a simple level. Don't try to do everything at once, but you need to have a simple structure that can be extended and grown. So that's it for the cloud. The minimum viable cloud. And if you follow these core principles and identify the base build structure, I think you can have a fairly good success with your cloud. Not only adoption on the front side of this, what I call the life cycle change that you're going to go through, where you're going to go through the depression phase, and you need to hurry up and get through that phase because you will learn a lot, and it is better to stay pedal to the metal. You may discover that when you go through the phase where you've got a project that was a tactical project, which is a cloud initiative, that may actually seem like it's becoming irrelevant as a strategic initiative, this is the time to realign towards the re-injection that cloud is a foundational layer that you're laying, and you got to build that capability, set those expectations, because you're actually laying the foundations for digital transformation and other things that the businesses really want you to do. Remember, they didn't, the business teams don't come to us and say, hey, I want a cloud. They usually say, there's a vendor here that's got services in the cloud, and if you don't have something that you can give me, I'm going there. A lot of times you won't even have that choice, that chance. They're just going to say, hey, we want you to just basically adopt this cloud operation. And quite frankly, the adoption of these services that are proliferating in the internet space for infrastructure, as well as software as a service and various flavors of software service, is the next topic I will cover as guidance to CIOs on how to stay out of how to change your organization to better prepare to adopt and quickly and rapidly adopt a different way of looking at managing cloud services and cloud initiatives. And that is the transformational conversation we'll have next. Until next time, Tim Fraser, 5D Options. Thanks for staying this long. I know this went a little bit longer than I expected, but thanks for sticking in there if you went this far. And please make some comments and some suggestions on other topics you'd like to hear from me. And I want to thank the Cloud Technology Partners once again for the foundational work that they've done in some of their articles over the last several years. That this has helped me grow personally, as well as my experience obviously with working with companies and getting things actually built and deployed and sharing those scars on my back. So thanks again. Till next time, this is Tim Fraser, 5D Options. See you later. Bye.